Elvis was halfway through An American Trilogy when he saw him. The International Hotel Showroom held over 2,000 people that night in August 1972, all of them on their feet, swaying to the hymn that had become Elvis's signature, Closer. The stage lights cut through the cigarette smoke in thick beams, illuminating faces lost in the music, hands raised, some singing along. But in the controlled chaos of a Vegas crowd, surrendering to emotion, one man sat perfectly still. Front row, center, maybe 24, 25 years old. Crew cut growing out unevenly. His right hand gripped the armrest of his seat. His left sleeve hung empty, pinned at the shoulder. In his lap, folded with military precision, sat a jacket, olive green, worn at the elbows, with patches Elvis couldn't quite make out from the stage. And the young man was crying, not sobbing, not making a scene. Just silent tears running down his face as Elvis sang about battle hymns and glory and the Republic. Elvis stopped singing mid-verse. The band, confused, kept playing for 2 more bars before the confusion rippled backward through the horns, the rhythm section, until finally Charlie Hodge looked up from his guitar and followed Elvis's gaze into the crowd. The music died. 2,000 people went from singing to murmuring to dead silence in the span of 10 seconds. Elvis stood at the microphone, breathing hard, staring at the young man in the front row. The veteran looked up, suddenly aware that the entire room was looking at him too. His face flushed red. He started to stand, to leave, to get out of whatever spotlight he'd accidentally stepped into. "Don't move, son," Elvis said into the microphone. His voice was quiet, but in that silence, it carried to every corner of the showroom. "Don't you move." Las Vegas in August 1972 was an air-conditioned fever dream suspended in the Mojave Desert. While the rest of America watched the Republican National Convention nominate Nixon for a second term, while protesters clashed with police in Miami, while the last American ground combat troops prepared to leave Vietnam, Vegas offered something else: escape, amnesia, a place where you could forget the world was on fire if you had enough money and enough pills and enough willingness to pretend. The International Hotel, soon to be renamed the Las Vegas Hilton, was the epicenter of that expensive amnesia. Elvis had been playing there since 1969, 2 shows a night, sometimes 4 weeks straight. By 1972, the residency had become something between a coronation and a cage. He was the king here, no question, but he was also trapped in a velvet-lined routine. The same stage, the same jokes, the same set list with minor variations, the same audience of high rollers and tourists who wanted to see Elvis Presley the icon, not Elvis Presley the man. This particular August night was the 3rd week of a month-long engagement. Elvis had started the evening the way he started most Vegas shows, with C.C. Rider, high energy, driving the crowd into immediate frenzy. He'd worked through Proud Mary, Never Been to Spain, medleys that showed off the band and gave him room to move, to joke, to be the entertainer everyone expected. The sweat poured off him under the lights. His white jumpsuit, studded with red and blue stones in an eagle pattern, clung to him. He drank water between songs, mopped his face with scarves that he then threw to women in the front rows, who screamed like he'd handed them pieces of the sun itself. But something felt different tonight. Maybe it was the news footage he'd seen that afternoon. More body bags coming home, more protesters, more of his country tearing itself apart over a war nobody could explain anymore. Maybe it was the pills wearing off at the wrong time, leaving him clear-headed when he usually counted on the fog to get through these shows. Maybe it was just that he'd been doing this too long, and the mask was starting to slip. Whatever it was, when he launched into An American Trilogy, The song hit him harder than usual. He'd been performing it for less than a year, a medley of Dixie, Battle Hymn of the Republic, and All My Trials, and it always got a reaction. But tonight, singing about glory and death and a nation divided, the words felt heavier in his mouth. The horns swelled behind him. The audience stood. And that's when he saw the veteran. The young man's name was Michael, though Elvis wouldn't learn that for another 20 minutes. Michael had arrived in Las Vegas 3 days earlier on a Greyhound bus from San Diego, carrying everything he owned in a duffel bag and wearing civilian clothes that didn't quite fit right anymore. He'd been discharged from the Naval Medical Center 2 months prior with an honorable discharge, a prosthetic arm that pinched at the shoulder socket, a prescription for Darwin that he rarely filled, and a letter from the Department of Defense thanking him for his service. He was from a town in Ohio that nobody had heard of. He'd enlisted at 19 because his father had served in Korea, and because college wasn't an option, and because he honestly believed back then that he was going to save people. He'd done 2 tours. The first one was endless boredom, punctuated by moments of terror. The second one ended on a dirt road outside Quảng, when the truck in front of his hit a mine and shrapnel tore through the canvas, covering the bed where he was sitting with 5 other Marines. He woke up in a field hospital. They told him about the arm before he could ask. They told him he was lucky. 3 of the men in his truck hadn't been lucky. He spent 6 months learning how to write with his right hand, how to button shirts, how to eat without knocking over his water glass. He learned how to lie to his mother on the phone and tell her he was fine. He learned how to sleep through the night without seeing the flash. Sometimes. He came to Vegas because he had nowhere else to go. His mother had remarried while he was overseas, some guy Michael had never met, who made it clear there wasn't room in the house for a 24-year-old who woke up screaming. His hometown had held a parade when he left. When he came back, nobody looked him in the eye. The job he'd been promised at the plant had been filled. Someone called him a baby killer at the grocery store. He didn't correct them, so he got on a bus heading west because west was far from Ohio, and because maybe in Vegas, where everything was fake anyway, he could be fake too. He could be just another anonymous person losing money at blackjack tables and drinking watered-down whiskey at 3 in the morning. He could disappear into the neon and the noise, and nobody would ask where his arm went. He'd bought the ticket to Elvis's show on impulse, with money he couldn't afford to spend. He'd seen Elvis on TV before he deployed, back when the world made sense, back when he had a girl who wrote him letters, and a future that extended past next week. He brought his uniform jacket to the show for reasons he couldn't articulate. Maybe because it was the only proof he had that he'd been somebody once. Maybe because carrying it was easier than leaving it behind in the motel room where he'd been staying, watching cockroaches crawl across the ceiling, and wondering how long his money would last. He hadn't expected to cry. He'd gotten very good at not crying. But when Elvis started singing an American Trilogy, something broke. Maybe it was the melody, so mournful under the triumphant horns. Maybe it was the words about battles fought and trials ending. Maybe it was just that he'd been holding everything in for so long, that the smallest crack let the ocean through. And then Elvis stopped singing. And then everyone was staring at him. And then Elvis was saying his name. No, not his name. Elvis didn't know his name. Elvis was saying son. But it felt like a name. The first time anyone had called him anything that mattered in months. "What's your name, son?" Elvis asked. The veteran's mouth moved, but no sound came out. The showroom was so quiet you could hear the ventilation system, the distant sound of slot machines from the casino floor, someone's nervous cough in the back. "It's okay," Elvis said. "Take your time." "Michael," the veteran finally said. His voice cracked. "Michael Brennan." "Michael," Elvis repeated, and the way he said it made it sound important. "You serve in Vietnam, Michael." Michael nodded. He looked down at the jacket in his lap, then back up at Elvis. "2 tours, Marines." Elvis set the microphone back in its stand and walked to the edge of the stage. The platform was high, 4 feet at least, but he knelt down anyway, bringing himself as close to eye level with Michael as the architecture would allow. His jumpsuit stretched across his knees. Sweat dripped from his hair onto the stage. "Did you just get back?" Elvis asked. 8 months ago." "And how's it been, Michael? How's it been being home?" Michael opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at the 2,000 people watching this conversation happen, and something in his face collapsed. "It hasn't been home," he said quietly. Elvis nodded, like that made perfect sense, like it was the sanest thing anyone had said to him in weeks. He looked at Michael for a long moment, then at the jacket in Michael's lap, then back at Michael's face. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Not the stage voice, not the entertainer, but something lower, more private. Except it was still going through the microphone, so everyone could hear it anyway. "I never served," Elvis said. "I was drafted in '58, did my time in Germany, but I never saw combat. Never got shot at, never lost." He gestured vaguely toward Michael's left side. "Never lost anything except time. And people thanked me for it. Threw me parades, called me a hero for driving a Jeep around and doing clerical work." He paused. The showroom was holding its breath. "So I don't know what you've been through," Elvis continued. "I don't know what it's like to come home and have people look away. But I know what it's like to feel like you're in the wrong place. And I know what it's like to need somebody to see you." Elvis stood up. He turned to his band, to Charlie Hodge standing by with his guitar. "Take 15, Elvis said. Not into the microphone, just to the band. But the room was so quiet, everyone heard it anyway. "Tell the colonel we're taking 15. Then he looked back down at Michael. "You mind coming backstage with me for a minute, son?" Michael stared at him. What?" "Just for a minute. Just you and me." "I want to talk to you." Elvis gestured toward the stage door. "Is that okay?" Michael looked around the showroom, at the crowd, at the band packing up for the break, at the exit signs glowing red in the darkness. He could say no. He could just leave, disappear into the casino, catch a bus back to the motel. But something in Elvis's face made him believe this wasn't a performance. This wasn't part of the show. "Okay," Michael said. What happened in Elvis's dressing room for the next 12 minutes was witnessed by only 3 people: Elvis, Michael, and Charlie Hodge, who stood by the door and later refused to tell anyone except his wife what he'd seen. The dressing room was smaller than Michael expected, more cramped than glamorous. Jumpsuits hung on a rack. Half-empty water bottles covered every surface. The mirror was surrounded by light bulbs, but most of them were burned out. Elvis sat Michael down in the makeup chair and pulled up a folding chair for himself, so they were sitting knee to knee. "Tell me about Ohio," Elvis said. So Michael told him. Not about the war. Elvis didn't ask about the war. Elvis asked about Michael's childhood, his parents, what he wanted to be when he was 10 years old. Michael heard himself talking about fishing with his grandfather, about a dog named Rusty, about the girl he dated in high school, who married someone else while he was overseas. He talked for 5 minutes straight, maybe longer, and Elvis just listened. Really listened. Not the way people usually listened while waiting for their turn to talk, but like every word mattered. When Michael finally stopped, Elvis was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what I think? I think you survived for a reason. I think you came home for a reason. And I think that reason is a lot bigger than what anybody in Ohio thinks about you." "I don't even know what I'm supposed to do now," Michael said. "I don't have a job. I don't have a place to live. I'm staying in a roach motel on Industrial Road, spending money I don't have. I came to your show tonight because I thought maybe if I could just feel something good for 2 hours, I could figure out how to keep going. But I don't know if I can." Elvis leaned forward. "You're going to keep going," he said. "You're going to keep going because you're stronger than you know. And I'm going to help you." "You can't." "I can and I will. Listen to me. I know a man in Los Angeles. Name's Jack Turner. He runs a karate studio, but he also helps veterans find work, find housing, find their footing. Good man. Real good man. I'm going to call him tonight, and I'm going to tell him about you, and he's going to help you. Okay?" Michael shook his head. "Why would you do that?" "Because I can. Because you need it. Because—" Elvis stopped, looked at the burned-out light bulbs around his mirror, then back at Michael. "Because I spend every night entertaining 2,000 people who forget about me the second they leave this building. And maybe, just maybe, if I can actually help one person, one real person who needs help, then all of this means something." Elvis stood up. He walked to the rack of jumpsuits, moved them aside, and pulled out a leather jacket. Not a stage jacket, just a normal brown leather jacket, worn soft with age. He handed it to Michael. "This was mine when I was in the army," Elvis said. "It's not much, but it's warmer than that uniform jacket, and it doesn't have any memories in it except good ones. I want you to have it." Michael took the jacket. His hand was shaking. "I can't." "You can, and you will." Elvis smiled, a real smile, not the stage smile. "And in 6 months, when Jack's got you set up with a job and a place and you're back on your feet, you're going to send me a postcard and tell me I was right. Deal?" Michael looked at the jacket, at Elvis, at Charlie Hodge by the door, who was definitely not crying but definitely wiping his eyes. "Deal," he whispered. Elvis put his hand on Michael's shoulder, the right shoulder, the one that was still there. "You're going to be okay, son. I promise you, you're going to be okay." Elvis went back on stage 13 minutes after he'd left it. The crowd, restless and confused, erupted when he appeared. He didn't explain where he'd been. He didn't explain what had happened. He just picked up the microphone, nodded to the band, and said, "Let's finish this thing." He sang An American Trilogy again from the beginning. This time, his voice broke on the line about trials ending. This time, the audience stayed completely silent throughout, like they understood that something had shifted, that they were no longer just watching a show, but witnessing something sacred. Michael Brennan watched from backstage, standing beside Charlie Hodge, wearing Elvis's leather jacket over his uniform shirt. When Elvis finished the song, Michael was crying again, but differently now. Not the silent tears of grief, but the kind of crying that comes when you realize you might actually survive. The show ended with Can't Help Falling in Love, as it always did. Elvis threw scarves to the crowd. He shook hands with people reaching toward the stage. He left to thunderous applause, but instead of going straight to his dressing room like usual, he found Michael backstage and walked him out to the parking lot personally, through back corridors that smelled like cigarettes and cleaning solution. In the parking lot, under the yellow sodium lights, Elvis gave Michael $300 in cash from his own wallet, Jack Turner's phone number written on the back of a set list, and one more promise. Call him tomorrow. Tell him Elvis sent you. He'll take care of you. Michael tried to thank him, but Elvis waved him off. Don't thank me. Just prove me right. Just keep going. Then Elvis did something Michael would remember for the rest of his life. He saluted. A perfect military salute, holding it until Michael, instinctively, saluted back with his remaining arm. "Welcome home, Marine," Elvis said. Then he turned and walked back into the building, back into the machine of lights and noise and performance, leaving Michael standing alone in the parking lot, wearing a leather jacket that smelled like Elvis's cologne, and holding $300 that meant the difference between homelessness and hope. Michael Brennan called Jack Turner the next morning from a payphone outside a coffee shop on Las Vegas Boulevard. Jack picked up on the second ring. "You must be Michael," he said, before Michael even introduced himself. "Elvis called me at midnight last night, told me you were one of the good ones. When can you get to L.A.? Within a week, Michael was in Los Angeles. Jack Turner put him up in a room above the karate studio, fed him, introduced him to other veterans who were finding their way back. Within a month, Jack connected Michael with a construction company that specifically hired disabled veterans. Within 3 months, Michael had an apartment, a steady paycheck, and a sponsor from Veterans of Foreign Wars who helped him navigate the bureaucracy of benefits he didn't know he was entitled to. Within 6 months, Michael sent Elvis a postcard. It showed the Hollywood sign at sunset. On the back, in cramped handwriting, "You were right, I'm okay. Thank you for seeing me when nobody else would. Semper Fi. Michael Brennan." Elvis kept that postcard in his wallet until he died 5 years later. Multiple people saw it there, worn soft from handling, the address side facing out so Elvis could see the message whenever he opened his billfold. But the story didn't end with the postcard. Jack Turner, impressed by Michael's determination and work ethic, started a formal program connecting entertainers with veterans who needed help. He called it the Michael Program, though Michael didn't know about that until years later. Dozens of veterans passed through Jack's studio in the 70s, many of them finding work, stability, and purpose through connections Jack made. When people asked Jack why he did it, he always said the same thing. "Elvis showed me that one act of kindness in front of 2,000 witnesses can change the world." The bootleg recording of that August 1972 show became legendary among Elvis collectors, not for the music, the sound quality was terrible, but for what you could hear at the 47-minute mark. Elvis stopping mid-song, the confused silence, the quiet conversation with a veteran whose name most people who heard the tape would never know. Collectors called it the Michael tape. People who listened carefully reported that you could hear Elvis's voice break when he said, "I want to talk to you." They said it was the most human moment ever captured on an Elvis recording. In 1989, Michael Brennan was interviewed by a local TV station in Los Angeles about his experience as a Vietnam veteran. He'd built a good life, married, 2 kids, 20 years with the same construction company, active in his VFW post. When the interviewer asked if there was a turning point, a moment when things changed, Michael told the story about Elvis. He told it simply, without drama, but his voice still shook when he described Elvis kneeling at the edge of the stage and asking his name. "He didn't have to do that," Michael said. "He was Elvis Presley. He could have ignored me. He could have had security escort me out. He could have finished the song and moved on with his show, and I would have just been another person who paid money to see Elvis Presley. But instead, he stopped everything. He saw me. And because he saw me, I learned how to see myself again." The interviewer asked what happened to the leather jacket. Michael smiled. "I still have it. I'll keep it till the day I die. Not because it was Elvis's, though that's pretty cool, but because it was the first gift I received after I came home. The first thing anybody gave me that wasn't pity or obligation. It was kindness, pure kindness, and it saved my life. There's a moral here that's bigger than Vegas, bigger than one veteran, bigger than Elvis himself. Elvis could have done what 99 performers out of 100 would have done. Acknowledged Michael with a nod, maybe dedicated a song to him, definitely kept the show moving, because you don't stop shows in Vegas. You don't interrupt the entertainment. You don't make the high rollers uncomfortable with real human pain. The Colonel, if he'd been in the room, would have had a heart attack. You don't stop the money machine. You don't turn entertainment into actual reality. But Elvis stopped. He walked away from the script, away from the safety of performance, away from the armor of being Elvis Presley the icon, and into the vulnerability of being Elvis Aaron Presley, the human being who understood loneliness and displacement and what it felt like to come home to a place that no longer felt like home. And in stopping, in choosing compassion over convenience, in choosing to see one suffering person clearly, instead of maintaining the comfortable blur of an audience, Elvis turned an entertainment product into a sacred moment. He turned a business transaction into a human connection. He turned 2 hours of escapism into a catalyst for someone's survival. We never know who's sitting in our audience. We never know who's struggling, who's barely holding on, who desperately needs to be seen. We move through life surrounded by people carrying invisible wounds, and most of the time we look past them because looking directly is uncomfortable, because helping would be inconvenient, because we've got our own shows to perform. But every once in a while, if we're brave enough to stop, to actually stop, to break the rhythm, to say everything else can wait, this person matters right now, we get to participate in something larger than ourselves. We get to be the reason someone makes it through the night. We get to be the answer to a prayer someone didn't even know how to pray. Elvis didn't cure PTSD that night. He didn't end the Vietnam War or solve the veteran crisis. He didn't even solve all of Michael's problems. Michael still had to do the hard work of rebuilding his life. But Elvis gave Michael something that no amount of money or therapy or government programs could provide. He gave him a moment of being fully seen, fully valued, fully believed in. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's exactly what someone needs to take the next step, and the next, and the next, until they've walked themselves back to life.